Welcome back to Process Cast with Mark Anderson and Samantha Blake, your go-to podcast for insights into business process management and the technologies transforming the way we work. In this episode, Samantha and Mark dive into a business process you can import into your HEFLO account for free. Click the link in the description to get it.
All right, so today we're looking at how organizations go about making things better, and not just by chance, but like through a system, a real intentional way. And we've got some great material that outlines this step-by-step structured approach, and I think for our listeners, this will be really fascinating to get that peek behind the curtain and see how thoughtful change actually unfolds.
Yeah, this is really about going beyond just, those fleeting ideas or that suggestion box that ends up ignored in the corner.
Right, gathering dust.
Yeah, it's a deliberate path that starts with someone spotting a chance to do things better, and then it goes through a whole journey to actually make that change happen and make it stick.
Okay, so let's dive in then. Where does this whole improvement process begin? Because it sounds like the initial spark can come from just about anywhere.
Yeah, and that's really a big plus of this approach. It recognizes that you don't have to be in a certain role or department to have a good idea. So whether you're someone who's dealing with a process every single day, right there on the front lines, or even someone outside the organization like a partner who interacts with them, if they see a way to improve how things work, there's a system for them to speak up.
That's cool. And so what's expected of the person who has that initial idea, the person, our source is called the requester.
Right.
It's got to be more than just saying, hey, this could be better, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The first and really the most crucial step for the requester is to articulate their idea really well, make it clear and detailed. So that means laying out exactly what problem they've seen, proposing a concrete solution, and explaining what benefits they expect.
So it's almost like building a case.
Yeah.
Like why this change needs to happen and what good will come out of it.
Exactly. It's like making that initial pitch.
Yeah. So not just a hunch or a feeling, they've got to put some thought into it, maybe even gather some evidence to back up their suggestion.
Yeah. Exactly. The more detail and support they can give from the start, things like specific examples, bits of relevant data, or even just a quick sketch of what they're proposing, the stronger that foundation for their request is going to be.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, our material mentions that these requests can actually start in a few different ways. It's not always like a formal internal document that's getting passed around.
Yeah, what's interesting here is how the process acknowledges that ideas can pop up from all over.
Right.
So yeah, you've got that traditional route where an employee internally sees something that can be improved and they submit a formal request. But this framework also allows for requests that come in through email. And that could be anything from customer feedback. Maybe they had a clunky experience with a process online, or even alerts that get triggered automatically by internal systems when they flag an inefficiency.
Like red flags going up.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all about capturing that potential for improvement wherever it shows up.
That's smart because you never know where that great idea is going to come from. It could be, like you said, a frustrated customer who emails about a confusing online form or something.
Exactly.
Okay. So once that idea is out there, no matter where it started, internally, externally, who takes a first look at it?
So that's where the process analyst comes in, and they're like the gatekeepers, the initial investigator for these improvement ideas. Well, a really vital first filter, making sure that the requests that are coming in are actually worth looking into further.
So a quality control checkpoint?
Yeah. You could say that their role is to validate the request against a few important criteria.
Okay.
So they'll check if it's complete, like did the requester give enough information so you can actually understand the issue and the proposed solution?
Yeah.
They'll look at the clarity. Is it easy to grasp the problem and the fix? And they consider the potential impact too. Like, is this change realistically going to lead to something significantly better?
Okay.
And really crucial, they check if it aligns with the organization's goals and strategic direction.
So it's not just, does this sound like a good idea in a vacuum? It's more like, does this fit into the big picture and can we actually pull this off?
Exactly.
What if a request doesn't meet these initial criteria?
If the process analyst sees that it's not valid based on those points, they don't just dismiss it silently.
Okay.
The framework is big on giving clear feedback to the requester, explaining exactly why it wasn't accepted at this stage. So maybe the request wasn't clear enough, or it didn't fit with the current strategic priorities, or maybe it just wasn't feasible with the resources or technology available.
I like that focus on transparency. It avoids that thing where good ideas just seem to disappear, and it actually gives people constructive feedback so they can either refine their idea or they better understand, maybe the constraints that are there.
Yeah, it keeps people engaged and reinforces the idea that this is a thoughtful process.
Yeah.
Not just rubber stamping every suggestion that comes through the door.
Right. It's got to be strategic.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say a request does pass this initial validation by the process analyst. What's next?
Then it moves into a more in-depth analysis. And the process analyst is still the one handling this.
Okay, so this is where they really roll up their sleeves and dig in.
Exactly. Once it's cleared those first hurdles, the request gets a much more thorough examination. The process analyst really dives deep to figure out the root cause of the problem that the request is trying to solve.
So not just putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms.
Right. It's about finding out why it's happening in the first place.
Getting to the bottom of it.
Yeah. And they also look way more closely at the expected impact of the proposed improvement.
Okay.
They'll figure out if it depends on other processes or systems in the organization, and they assess any risks that might come with making this change. And they'll identify all the different stakeholders, the people or teams who would be affected by this change. And they start looking at different solutions, different ways to optimize the process.
So that sounds like a lot of work for the process analyst.
It is.
What's the end result of all this in-depth analysis? What do they come out with?
Usually they'll have a well-documented change proposal. So this document is like a complete overview of the problem after they've really investigated it.
Okay.
The specific solution that they're recommending, a detailed breakdown of what impact they expect, and all those other important things they found during the analysis.
So it's setting the stage.
Yeah, it's laying the groundwork for the next crucial step, which is the strategic evaluation.
All right, so now we move up the ladder a bit to the change committee, and this sounds like where the big decisions happen, which improvements actually get the... Go ahead.
That's right. The change committee is the group that's in charge of evaluating the strategic value of the proposed changes. They're the ones who decide which of these well-analyzed proposals should actually be put into action. And this really highlights that leadership is right there in the mix when it comes to deciding how processes evolve and improve.
So what are the big factors that the change committee considers when they're making these decisions? I imagine it's more than just a thumbs up or thumbs down.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They take a much broader view. They look at the whole picture. Of course, they'll consider all the analysis and recommendations from the process analyst, but they're also looking at the cost of implementing the change.
Makes sense.
All the resources that would be needed, money, people, and the expected benefits. Right. Things like better efficiency, improved quality, better regulatory compliance, or any other key performance indicators that the organization really cares about.
So it's like weighing what you'll get out of it against what you put in.
Yeah, they're balancing those potential rewards and positive impacts against any drawbacks or challenges.
Right, making sure that anything they approve is moving the organization in the right direction.
Exactly. It has to be in line with the big picture, the overall business strategy.
And what are the possible outcomes of this evaluation by the change committee? It can't just be a simple yes or no, right?
You're right. It's usually not that straightforward.
Yeah.
They can definitely give the proposal the green light and say, go ahead, implement it fully. Or they might reject it if they don't see enough value in it, or if the risks seem to outweigh the benefits. But they can also defer a decision.
Okay.
Maybe they need more information, or it's just not the right time for that specific change. And a lot of times they might ask for a revision. They'll suggest certain areas that need more work or clarification before they can give it the thumbs up.
That seems very practical, and it shows that this isn't always a straight line from idea to implementation.
Right.
Sometimes there's some back and forth.
Yeah.
So what happens after the change committee makes their decision? Does the person who had the original idea just get a notification?
The framework stresses the importance of keeping everyone in the loop throughout the whole process. So the requester, that person who first had the idea, they get told what the change committee decided, along with a clear explanation of why.
Okay.
And if it's approved, they'll also get information about what happens next in the implementation.
So even if it's rejected, they get an explanation.
Yes, exactly, because that helps them understand the reasoning. And like we said earlier, it might encourage them to revise their proposal or come up with other ideas in the future.
Okay, so let's say a proposal gets the green light from the change committee. What's next? That's when the real work of putting this change into practice begins, right?
Yeah, so once a change is officially approved, the first practical step is updating all the relevant documentation. That means things like the process models, step-by-step work instructions, the standard operating procedures, even the training materials that employees use. The goal here is to really embed this approved change into how the organization works officially. So everyone's on the same page with the new procedures.
Yeah, you can't just announce a change and expect everyone to know what to do.
Exactly.
Got to update the official guidelines.
Right.
All right, so then how is this new way of working actually communicated and rolled out to the wider team in the organization?
This framework really highlights how crucial proactive and clear communication is. So the process analysts, they're often the ones who tell all the relevant staff about the change. And importantly, they explain how it affects their day-to-day work.
Okay.
And this can happen through different channels, emails, newsletters, intranet announcements, team meetings, or even specific training sessions that get people familiar with the new process. It's all about being transparent. Make sure everyone understands the change and why it's happening and what their new responsibilities or procedures are.
It was really engaging with the team.
Yeah, not just flipping a switch and expecting everyone to magically adapt.
Right.
It's about making sure they understand and giving them the support they need to make the transition.
Now, after the change is rolled out and everyone's hopefully on board with the new way of doing things, is that the last step in this process?
It's not quite the end. There's a really important final step, and that's assessing the actual impact of the change.
Okay.
This is where the organization looks back and figures out if the benefits they expected have actually happened in real life.
So it's like a checking the results phase.
Yeah, it's about being accountable and learning from each change that's made.
So how does this impact assessment usually happen?
Usually they'll look at key performance indicators. They compare data from before the change to data after the new process has been running for a while. And they'll often get feedback directly from the staff, the people who are using the new process, to understand their experience, see if there are any unexpected issues or consequences, and gauge how satisfied they are with the new way of working.
So data, but also real people's experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
And is this assessment like the definitive end for this specific improvement, or could it lead to more changes?
It's not necessarily the final word. The assessment might show that the change was successful and met expectations. But it could also reveal areas where further tweaks are needed to optimize the new process.
Right.
Or even highlight brand new opportunities for improvement that popped up as a result of the initial change.
Interesting.
So it can kickstart a whole new cycle of improvement.
It's a continuous loop.
Yeah, it keeps going.
So just to quickly recap, the whole journey starts with an idea for improvement that can come from anywhere. That idea gets documented. A process analyst checks and makes sure it's feasible and strategically aligned. Then there's a deep analysis of the problem and potential solutions.
Right.
The change committee evaluates it and makes a decision. And if it's approved, it's implemented, communicated to everyone, and then its impact is assessed.
Exactly.
So what are the different ways this whole process can finally wrap up?
Well, the best case scenario is that the change gets implemented successfully, is documented well, communicated clearly, and the assessment confirms it achieved the desired outcomes. That improved process then becomes the new standard way of working.
Yeah.
But like we mentioned earlier, another possibility is that the change committee doesn't approve the proposal. And in that case, that specific suggestion isn't implemented at that time.
Okay.
But it might be saved for later or revisited if things change within the organization.
All right, so this has been a really interesting look at how organizations can systematically improve their operations. It's not just about making random changes. It's about following a careful process, from recognizing a need to actually making things better.
I agree. And understanding this framework really shows all the different levels of thought and expertise that go into managing change well. In the end, it's about making sure any improvement is well thought out, fits with the organization's goals, and helps it succeed overall.
So for our listeners out there, think about the processes you encounter in your own work or even in your personal life. Where could applying a similar structured approach, clearly identifying a problem, proposing a solution, thinking about the implications, and then checking the results, where could that lead to meaningful positive changes?
Yeah, it's a powerful framework that can really be used in many different areas.
It's not just for businesses.
No, not at all.
Thank you for listening to ProcessCast. This episode was brought to you by HEFLO, the BPM platform that empowers businesses to document, automate, and optimize their processes with AI. Experience the intelligence to simplify complex business processes and accelerate your growth with our complete management solution. Visit HEFLO.com to learn more. Be sure to follow ProcessCast for more insights on business process management, and don't forget to share this episode with your network. Until next time.